Okay, this is Hosen, part 2 on competition, the meaning of competition, the meaning of competitiveness. So when I called the ball out, the guy yelled, "In!" And then as I turned around to walk back to the serving line, I heard the sound of his tennis racket being thrown up against the wall. He didn't want to be given a point that he didn't earn. And I wasn't trying to do it, but I couldn't call it out. And since I didn't really give a shit, he, from all the way across the court, called it against himself. And then got pissed off and threw his racket. He was pissed off at himself. Anyway, in the end, he won. Now, I wasn't playing well, and I was dissatisfied with my play. And I would like to have beaten him by playing a good match. But it was clear he was going to beat me along the way, and I tried because I didn't want it to be an empty win for him. That wouldn't have been fair to him. And his response, was that he was supposed to fight for every point and go down to the wire, not let anybody cheat him. Of course, in this case, I cheated myself, and so he had to correct that. And the win was very, very important to him. He didn't play especially well, and he wasn't an especially pretty player to watch. But what I concluded was, what does this match tell me about myself? Well, it tells me I'm an inconsistent player. It tells me I'm not getting any better. It tells me I need to quit this shit. I need to quit playing tennis. And that was the feedback. It told me something about how good I was, and I learned it by competing against another player who was better. But the win or the loss wouldn't have made any difference. So what if I had played really badly and he had broken his leg and was limping around? I mean, would that have been a win? Would I have cared? What I cared about, I wanted to be a good player. I wanted to feel the ball coming off the racket nicely. I liked the move. And so, the idea is competition means you have to work at it, and it means you have to make a real effort, or it's no fun for anybody. But it also tells you something about yourself. There are a great many things people can do in the world that do not involve competition. But competition tells you something about your ability and something about the quality of your play, your competence. Now, this is a tennis match. If you win a tennis match. If you lose a tennis match. And if you play badly, then you're either an inconsistent tennis player or you're a bad tennis player. I was a bad tennis player. He was a good tennis player. But the idea of winning to have 170 trophies instead of 169 is pretty ridiculous. In the case of competition, a global competition, this is necessary. If an American company doesn't sell something, then a company from outside the U.S. will. And the U.S. will be poorer, and it will have to consume less because it was unable to sell something to customers outside the country. What you get when you get a hyper-competitive culture is that people begin to have targets that are proxies they bear no relationship to whatever it is that the activity is about. The competition is in terms of numbers. Now, tennis matches in terms of numbers, but if you're in an academic context and you're taking a course that has no relationship to anything in the world except getting a degree, which has nothing to do with anything in the world except conning somebody into thinking you're qualified for a job, which has nothing to do with anything in the world except whether the person who hires you gets credit for having hired somebody with a high score. All of these things are very remote from reality. So we call this a proxy variable. You take a test. Well, if you want to be an engineer, do you go out and build a bridge, and then we drive over your bridge 10,000 times, and then see if we end up in the body of water that it's over? Or do we construct something that a testing house has come up with that is easier and simpler, and that they can sell to the idiots who are running the school, and because the idiots who are running the school can impose their standards on the students have to take that seriously. Now, measurements of academic success involve a high degree of rivalry. But when you get through taking an exam that you know was bullshit, and that you know that you're not gonna know anything about in another 24 hours, then what you're doing is you're buying into somebody else's standards. And so this is the credentialing system. So, who benefits? The testing house, the administrators, the people who endow the university for whatever reason, the instructors, the professors, the people who clean the labs. All of these people are tied in. So if you have a system that rewards doing well on proxy measurements, then what you have is a con job. Now, I'm obviously somebody who has not done well in the academic world. Believe me, that's an understatement. But I do have one little talent, and that is when you give me a test that depends on an affinity with numbers, I do very well on it. So in my GRE, I scored 800 on the quantitative section when I was in my 20s. And then when I was 70 years old, trying to get a job teaching an SAT prep course, and everybody else was competing with me was 25 or 30, I'd scored 800 on the quantitative section again, and a total score of 1550, which is what I also got on the GRE. Now, these are proxies. It took me 26 years to go from a freshman in college to receiving a 9th-rate doctorate from a 10th-rate school, and incurred the enmity of every establishment figure along the way. But what is really involved in teaching and learning? How much time have we got?
3 minutes on this one.
Okay, so I mean, one of the things I learned about myself, besides the fact that numbers are in my blood, I apparently learned arithmetic when I was 4 or 5 without anybody knowing how I did it. I wasn't a prodigy or anything. I mean, I wasn't that good, but I was good, which enabled me basically to build on all the practice I got, because I had 2 or 3 years of practice when other kids didn't know anything about arithmetic. The other skill that I've got is that I seem to be able to walk into public meetings, into classrooms, whether elementary school, junior high, high school, college, graduate school, and I'm able to create material spontaneously after walking in, basically by monitoring the responses of the students and trying to direct their attention toward some outcome that relates to reality somewhere down the line. And so I've done this in general science in junior high, economics, psychology, addiction, counseling, I wrote them down so I would be very efficient, like a real student, like a real organized person. Only this is the wrong page. Well, so let's wrap this up till
Part 3.
So I've got